Evi Jasa Kustu Trihubana Srila Prabhupada Patita Bhavana Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Namo Krishna Pradaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavari Pasyata Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Kishore Kishore, Kishore Kishore, Kishore Kishore, Jaya Kishore Kishore. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra. Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Jasodanandana Vrajajannaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishrupapanamahamsa Parivrajakacarya Ashtarushata Shri Srimad Savayam Grace Yusuf Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Rajagranta Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Samveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Nitai Govnandi. All glories to the Devotees, all glories to the Devotees, all glories to Shri Shri Gauranga. O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Alright, do the word-to-word meaning. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 1, Text 27. Tasmin, in that Paramahamsa ashram, certainly, ha, so celebrated, va, indeed, upashamashila, in the renounced order of life, Paramarishaya, the great sages, Sakala, all, Jiva, of living entities, Nikaya, in total, Avasasya, the resonance, Bhagavata, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudevasya, Lord Vasudev, Bhitanam, of those afraid of material existence, Sharana Bhutasya, the one who is the only shelter, Srimat, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Charana Aravinda, the lotus feet, Avirata, constantly, Smarana, remembering, Avigalita, completely uncontaminated, Parama, supreme, Bhakti Yoga, of mystic devotional service, Anubhavena, by the prowess, Paribhavita, purified, Anta, within, Hridaya, the heart, Adhigate, perceived, Bhagavati, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sarvesham, of all, Bhutanam, living entities, Atmabhute, situated within the body, Pratyak, directly, Atmani, with the Supreme Super Soul, Eva, certainly, Atmanaha, of the Self, Tadatmyam, qualitative equality, Avisheshena, without differences, Samiyu, realized. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation, thus situated in the renounced order from the beginning of their lives, all three of them completely controlled the activities of their senses and thus became great saints. They concentrated their minds always upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is a resting place of the totality of living entities, and who is therefore celebrated as Vasudev. Lord Vasudeva is the only shelter of those who are actually afraid of material existence. By constantly thinking of his lotus feet, these three sons of Maharaj Priyavrata became advanced in pure devotional service. By the prowess of their devotional service, they could directly perceive the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in everyone's heart as the Super Soul, and realized that there was qualitatively no difference between themselves and him. Purport. The Paramahamsa stage is the topmost position in renounced life. In sannyasa, the renounced order, there are 4 stages: Kutichaka, Bahudaka, Parivrajacacharya, and Paramahamsa. According to the Vedic system, when one accepts the renounced order, he stays outside his village in a cottage, and his necessities, especially his food, are supplied from home. This is called the Kutichaka stage. When a sannyasi advances further, he no longer accepts anything from home. Instead, he collects his necessities, especially his food, from many places. This system is called Madhukhari, which literally means the profession of the bumblebees. As bumblebees collect honey from many flowers, a little from each, so a sannyasi should beg from door to door, but not accept very much food from any particular house. He should collect a little bit from every house. This is called the Bahudaka stage. When a sannyasi is still more experienced, he travels all over the world to preach the glories of Lord Vasudeva. He is then known as Parivrajacacharya. The sannyasi reaches the Paramahamsa stage when he finishes his preaching work and sits down in one place, strictly for the sake of advancing in spiritual life. An actual Paramahamsa is one who completely controls his senses and engages in the unalloyed service of the Lord. Therefore, all 3 of these sons of Priyavrata, namely Kavi, Mahavira, and Savana, were situated in the Paramahamsa stage from the very beginning. Their senses could not disturb them, for their senses were completely engaged in the service and serving the Lord. Therefore, the 3 brothers are described in this verse as Upashama Shila. Upashama means completely subdued. Because they completely subdued their senses, they are understood to have been great sages and saints. After subduing their senses, the 3 brothers concentrated their minds upon the lotus feet of Vasudeva, Lord Krishna. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 7:19, Vasudeva Sarvam Iti. The lotus feet of Vasudeva are everything. Lord Vasudeva is the reservoir of all living entities. When this cosmic manifestation is dissolved, all living entities enter the supreme body of the Lord, Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, who merges within the body of Mahavishnu. Both of these Vishnu Tattvas are Vasudeva Tattvas, and therefore the great sage Kavi Mahavira and Savana concentrated always upon the lotus feet of Lord Vasudeva, Krishna. In this way they can understand that the Super Soul within the heart is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they can recognize their identity with Him. The complete description of this realization is that simply by discharging the unalloyed form of devotional service, one can realize his self completely. The Parama Bhakti Yoga mentioned in this verse means that a living entity, by dint of unalloyed devotional service, has no other interest than the service of the Lord, as described in Bhagavad Gita, Vasudeva Sarvam Iti. By Parama Bhakti Yoga, by elevating oneself to the highest platform of loving service, one can automatically be relieved from the bodily concept of life and see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face, as confirmed in Brahma Samhita. Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundara Machinta Guna Swarupam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Vajami. An advanced devotee who is known as a sat or saint can always see within his heart the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. Krishna, Sham Sundar, expands himself by his plenary portion, and thus a devotee can always see him within his heart. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Agyantamirandasya Gadajana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadhati Swapadantikam Vancha Kaputarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyadevacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we're hearing about Priyavrata's 3 of his sons out of, I think, 10 children. In the previous verses we had heard how they were brahmacharis. They were trained brahmacharis from childhood, and they were very conversant with the highest perfection, known as the Paramahamsa ashram. So in this verse, a description of the Paramahamsa ashram is being further elaborated upon. So the Paramahamsa, Srila Prabhupada's purport here is that the Paramahamsa stage, there are 4 stages of sannyas life. This is Prabhupada's first point. 4 stages of sannyas life. The first stage is called Kutichaka, which means that after leaving the household situation, one would stay outside the village, and one's family will still continue to provide foodstuffs for him. That's what particularly was pointed out. When it becomes a little bit more advanced, it comes to the Bahodaka stage, where he stops accepting foodstuffs from the family members and begins begging madhukari from house to house, taking a little bit from here, a little bit from there, a little bit from there. Madhukari means the profession of a bumblebee. In that way, he maintains himself. When it becomes a little bit more advanced, he becomes Parivrajacharya, which means he becomes a preacher. He travels around from village to village, or I think in Prabhupada Lamrita they call it jet plane Parivrajacharya. There's one chapter like that called jet plane Parivrajacharya. Srila Prabhupada said of village to village, country to country, around the world 14 times, jet plane Parivrajacharya. One that travels around the world preaching the glories of the Supreme Lord. And this is in the Vedic scheme of things, Prabhupada points out here. And then the final stage of sannyas life is known as the Paramahamsa stage. At that stage, Prabhupada says here, this is in the Vedic scheme of things, one stops his preaching work and stays in one spot and just absorbs himself in bhajan and making further advancement in devotional service. When we chant the Premadwani prayers, we say Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya. We include both if you are noticing that. We say Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya. So the idea here is that generally in the Vedic scheme of things, which Srila Prabhupada is pointing out here, the Paramahamsa position is a superior position than the Parivrajacharya position. So in other words, staying in one spot, absorbing oneself in the bliss of bhajan, and just making further advancement in devotional service is considered a superior position than traveling around the world and preaching. And many of us may be attracted to that. Arjuna was attracted to that idea in context. But when we say our Premadwani prayers, our glorification of the acharyas, we use the phrase Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya to indicate that preaching the glories of the Lord all over the world is not a lesser position than remaining in one spot and absorbing oneself in the bliss of bhajan. And the reason for that being is, Srila Prabhupada says here, an actual Paramahamsa is one who completely controls his senses and engages in the unalloyed service of the Lord. So this is the real meaning of what it means to be a Paramahamsa, that one should be 100% engaged in the service of Krishna. Because it is Krishna's desire that his glories be spread all over the world, then one who fulfills that desire is actually a Paramahamsa. One who's dedicated his energy only to fulfilling that desire of the Lord, then that is the actual true position of Paramahamsa. So we use the phrase Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya because Srila Prabhupada and those who follow in Srila Prabhupada's footsteps, they're traveling all over the world to fulfill the desire of the Supreme Lord. Is not a lesser position than remaining in one spot and absorbing themselves in the happiness of Krishna consciousness, but rather taking the trouble to travel hither and thither for the benefit of the conditioned souls is itself the activity of a Paramahamsa, because that is the desire of the Supreme Lord. When Mahaprabhu was in traveling, well, two things. One story is there with, who was it? Vallabhacharya, I think, or Venkataba, I can't remember which one. Someone's name who begins with a V. They were saying, maybe it was Vallabhacharya. They were saying, yeah, they were trying to find fault because Lord Chaitanya would always be cutting down Vallabhacharya's pride. And so he wanted to kind of show that he knew something also. So he had Vallabhacharya, he was a contemporary of Lord Chaitanya. He had written a commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam, and he thought it was superior than the commentary given by Sridhar Swami. And Mahaprabhu's opinion of that is that one who doesn't accept the Swami is a prostitute. So he wasn't giving very much consideration to the commentary of Vallabhacharya. And so because Lord Chaitanya didn't give much consideration to it, no one gave consideration to it. So Vallabhacharya wanted to show his prowess, his knowledge like that. So at one point, he was trying to find fault with the preaching activities of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. He said, you Gaudiya Vaishnavas are always chanting Hare Krishna. This is not very good because Krishna is the pati, he's the husband. And the wife should not say the name of the husband in public arena, aloud, like this. This is, nowadays I don't know if this is followed. But traditionally, I guess, the wife should not say the name of the husband. Usually she refers to the husband as Swami, I think, or something like this is traditional. Now I don't think they follow this now, but traditionally they would call a husband as Swami. But the devotees were saying Krishna's name publicly. So Vallabhacharya said, all the jivas are Prakriti and Krishna is the only Purusha, so Krishna is the pati of all the jivas. So why are you loudly saying the name of the husband in public arena? You should, keep quiet. And to that, Mahaprabhu said, yes, that is true. But because Krishna, we have to follow the orders of the husband. And because Krishna has told in Bhagavad Gita, Satatam Kirtanyanto Ma, you should always be chanting my glories aloud. So we have to follow his order. Therefore, we're loudly chanting Hare Krishna. Oh, Vallabhacharya felt he felt unhappy. He was just trying to find some way to defeat Mahaprabhu, get him to consider his learning like that. There was another example I wanted to give. Anyway, the idea I wanted to express is that following the order of the Supreme Lord, that is what it means to be a Paramahamsa in the true sense. Dedicating one's life, wealth, intelligence, words we were hearing yesterday, I think, prana artha diya vacha, to fulfilling the desire of the Lord. That is what it means to be a Paramahamsa. Another instance, Gaur Leela, when Mahaprabhu was in Kormastan, and he met the Korma Brahmana, and the Korma Brahmana wanted to travel with him, and he was afraid of the Vishaya Taranga, the waves of material enjoyment that he would be experiencing in his householder situation. So he wanted to travel with Mahaprabhu and leave the family. That was a quite common affair. Naturally, when one sees the Supreme Lord, they want to travel with him. So to that, Mahaprabhu responded, famous verses there, Yare deke tare kaha Krishna upadesh amara daya guruhan tara idesh. Mahaprabhu says, wherever you go, it is interesting that before he gives his instruction, he says, first you should constantly be chanting Harinam. He said, Nirantara Nam, constantly you should be chanting the holy names of Krishna. Then he gives the second verse, which is very famous, that wherever you go, whoever you meet, then you should try to tell them about Krishna. He tells like this, and in this way, on my order, become a guru and deliver everyone in this desh, this land. And then after that, probably seeing that the Korma Brahmana was not looking so ecstatic in the face, then Mahaprabhu says in the verse after that, he comments, I actually came up a few purports ago, I think. Kabuna bhadibe tomara vishaya taranga punarapi etani pabe moro sangha. He says to the Brahmana that if you shall follow my order, then you will not have to be concerned about being bound. Kabuna bhadibe means to be bound up. You will not have to be concerned about being bound by the vishaya taranga. Your material life, your existence in this material world shall not obstruct you if you follow my order. And punarapi etani pabi moro sangha. And in that following of my order, there you will have my association. Pabi moro sangha. You will have my association in the following of my order. This reminds me of like in the first canto with Arjuna. Arjuna was suffering the pangs of separation from Krishna. And he goes through a whole series of prayers of gratitude to Krishna. And he, he's ready to give up his life air, basically. We can't imagine what it must be like to be. We know what it's like to be separated from Krishna, but we don't mind so much. We can't understand what it would be like to love Krishna and then have to experience separation. Externally seen, it's a very painful experience. Arjuna was ready to give up his life air, but then he remembered the instructions that Krishna imparted to him on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, the Bhagavad Gita. And when remembering those instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, immediately, Sutta Goswami comments, immediately he can understand that he was actually having the association of the Lord and his absorption in the instructions of Lord Krishna. Same idea. Mahaprabhu says, if you should accept my order, then there you will have my Sangha. So always trying to fulfill the order of the Supreme Lord and his representative is what is actually meant by Paramahamsa. So it is not that to be a worldwide preacher is a lesser position, because that position is accepted for the purpose of pleasing the Supreme Lord or pleasing his representatives. So this is actually meaning of Paramahamsa. So in order to come to that platform, it is mentioned here, one has to become upashamashila. One has to be completely subdue his mind and senses. This is no one can make advancement in the devotional service of the Lord without first subduing the mind and senses. Vacho vegam manasakroda vegam, jiva vegam udurapasa vegam, etam vegam yovishahetadira. Without becoming a controller of the urges of the senses and the mind, then one cannot become dhira. And without being dhira, one will not be able to tolerate the force of dualities that's constantly accosting the living entity in the material world. Krishna mentions in the Gita, after he talks about how you're not the body, then he speaks for those who don't have that realization, the necessity for them to cultivate tolerance on tolerance of duality that will be experienced in the mind on account of not being fully self-realized. And then the verse after that, he talks about when one becomes dhira in the face of samma dukkha sukham dhiram, when one becomes equal vision and the sukha and the dhira, sukha and the dukkha, that he will be experiencing dhiram. Dhira is meant that he fixes his intelligence in his dharma. It is translated there, mentioned. When he becomes dhira, sober, and equal to the dualities experienced in this material world, then for him, I forget the last line, amrita is available. Amrita tvaya kalpate. The amrita, liberation, is available for that person. So one cannot become liberated in the devotional service of the Lord without becoming upashama shila. One has to subdue his mind and senses. Otherwise, it's not at all possible. This is generally the major obstacle in devotional service is weakness and mind and sense control. This is a general in fact, when Krishna describes the position of the person who is self-realized, in chapter 2, he describes them in terms of their ability to control their senses. That is the description that's given of a self-realized person. It's not that he was absorbed in prema bhakti rasa and something like really far out and lofty, and we'll all be like starry-eyed and like, wow, when would that happen to me? Krishna speaks very practically. He controls his mind and senses. Oh, where's the nectar in that? And but it's a lot of nectar when you're being tormented by your mind and senses. Then you understand. Because for one who cannot control the mind and senses, then his heart will always be tormented. His heart will always, he'll live a life of sorrow. Not even if he's not pursuing sense gratification, just the contemplation of it will cause his heart to go into a state of sorrow and torment, just because he's not controller of mind and senses. So when Krishna describes, Arjuna asks what is the position of a self-realized person. Now, how does he speak? What is his language, etc.? How does he sit? How does he walk? So the idea here is that how does he control his senses when they're not engaged? How does he control them? And when they are engaged, how does he use them? This is the meaning of that. What is his speech? It means how does he respond to the various circumstances in this reality? We're going back to Bhagavad Gita, back to basics here. So to that, how does he sit? I'm not going to go through all the details. But how does he sit means how does he control his senses? So then Krishna gives the example of a tortoise. That a tortoise, just as when a tortoise can withdraw its limbs within the shell, and no one can force those limbs out, right? You can't like stick your hand in there and like try to pull it out, or just shake it and then his limbs come out. Nothing can, unless the tortoise wants to bring his limbs out, then they will not come out. So Krishna gives it in the same way, unless the transcendentalist wants to engage his senses, nothing will excite him to engage his senses. That's how controlled he is of his senses. Prabhupada says this is the first duty of a transcendentalist. First duty. Same thing he says in Nectar Instruction Preface. First duty, that nothing can excite the senses unless you want to engage your senses. That would be so nice to say that, wouldn't it? Who here can say like that? Unless I want to use my senses, I will not use them. Who can say like that? That's a very profound state of realization. Very profound. Simple example, you like carrot cake, and the carrot cake comes in front of you, unless I want to engage my tongue, I will not engage it. No, as soon as the carrot cake comes, immediately you take it. You cannot resist. And even if you shall resist externally, the mind will be looking at that. You know you want that. And then the cake will start speaking to you. Come on, Prabhu, I'm here for the taking. Why are you not taking? And then because of excessive contemplation of it, and then the attachment comes, and because of not enjoying that, from the attachment, the strong desire to have it comes, the extreme thirst for it comes. And then if you're not enjoying it, then the anger comes, the frustration, the sorrow in life. That experience happens because of contemplating like that. So Krishna said, this is the first test of one. So how do I know if I'm becoming realized? The first test. That you can control your senses. Unless you want to engage your senses, you will not engage your senses. That's the first test. As soon as a very pleasing sense object comes in front of you, you will not, generally when a pleasing sense object comes in front of boom, the senses just get fixed just spontaneously, without even endeavoring. You don't have to go through a whole process of, okay, I need to meditate upon this sense object and develop. No, boom, immediately, instant spontaneous attraction is there. You have to do the other way to get off the sense object. Apply my intelligence. Okay, remember some slokas from Bhagavad Gita. Pray to Krishna. So many things have to be applied to. Come on. The senses are locked on. You're like, come on. You have to use so much endeavor. It's very hard. So then the next question comes that, well, is it hard to do that? For the transcendentalist to just have so much control of the sense? It must be really painful experience. It must be painful experience. And just like sometimes when people hear that we're celibates, they think it's very painful. Oh, excuse me? Oh yes, we're practicing celibacy. Our one Bhakti Peter was here, young Chota Pete. He called his girlfriend and said, I'm thinking about practicing celibacy. She said, that's great. I'll see you later. Have a great life. She dumped him on the spot. Dumped him on the spot. She didn't appreciate his celibacy so much. Huh? In other words, it must be difficult to, even if you are able to control your senses, you must be very painful experience. So then in the next verse, Krishna says, no, not painful experience. Why? Because he has a higher taste. Krishna, it is not that he is straining hard to control his senses, but it's because by dint of a higher taste, he is controlling his senses. Krishna mentions this point. There's one type of person who he's restraining his senses, but his consciousness is totally fixed on his sense objects. For him, he will be tormenting himself, definitely. And soon he will fall down. But the other type of person, by dint of a higher experience in spiritual realization, spontaneously his senses are directed elsewhere and away from the degrading sense objects. So not at all difficult by dint of a higher taste. But then, in text 60, which is the next text, Krishna speaks about how difficult it is to get that higher experience by mentioning that there are many, I was looking at the verses here. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind, even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. So in this verse, Krishna points out that to get that higher taste is not an ordinary thing, that they're just able to control it. To get that higher taste is an extraordinary thing. And for those who lack such higher experience in spiritual realization, then even though they're endeavoring to control their mind and senses, boom, forcibly. The sense objects are very powerful, even though they're inanimate objects. They're not alive. They can't force you to do anything. But they're just there. And as soon as you shall see it, immediately the mind becomes captured. And then forcibly drags the mind down, 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 deep into ignorance. The more he thinks about it, the more he thirsts after it, deeper down into ignorance he goes. Even a man of discrimination. So Prabhupada gives the example of Vishwamitra Muni and others. Yogis, very powerful personalities, but being dragged away from the senses. It's not an extraordinary thing. Sometimes when devotees have difficulties in Krishna consciousness, people write all types of articles online and all these things, but the devotees been struggling with, everyone's been struggling with this since time immemorial. I remember Vaisheshika Prabhu came here, gave a class, he said, who is the master of this world? And everyone gave super soul and various technical answers. And then he said, no, the senses. The senses. The senses are the lords of this world. They're controlling everything. Very difficult. So Krishna in text 60 speaks about the rarity of that higher experience. And then in text 61, he speaks about what is required to get that experience. One who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me. Yukta asita matpara. When he fixes his consciousness on Krishna, then he can start to cultivate a higher experience. In other words, we're talking about how to come to the Paramahamsa stage. One has to control the mind and senses. That is impossible. And the reason it's impossible is because they're Krishna's energies, they're not our energy. Right? Under the illusion of false ego, ahankara vimudatma, we're thinking the senses belong to us, the mind belongs to us, and then we can control them. But actually it's Krishna's external energy. And Krishna's external energy is not under the control of the jiva. Therefore Krishna says, Daiviyesha gunamayi mama maya dharatya. It's under Krishna's control. Therefore the attempt to control the mind and senses by those who are not Krishna consciousness is an impossible task. It can only actually be fully achieved by becoming Krishna conscious, or by acknowledging the actual controller of the mind and senses, and then acknowledging Krishna as that actual controller, engaging one's mind and senses in relationship to Krishna. Every sense, the eyes have to be engaged in seeing the deity, seeing the devotees, hands engaged in serving the deity, devotees, the temple, etc. The senses have to be engaged in relation to Krishna, every sense. And even one of the roaming senses in which the mind focuses can carry away the transcendentalists into darkness. Even one of the roaming senses. In other words, Krishna says it doesn't take much to fall down, Prabhu. Even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away the mind of a transcendentalist. So we want to come to the stage of being able to completely please Krishna. But then the process of doing that is by beginning to Krishnaize our senses, by keeping them in relationship to Krishna. Upashama, in that way subdue the senses and come to the level of Krishna consciousness. After subduing their senses, then they were considered as great saints and sages. After subduing. Then one is considered saintly or sadhu. And then, because their mind and senses were, their senses were controlled, they can always think of Krishna. So this is the main pivot in Krishna consciousness. Always remembering Krishna, never forgetting Krishna. So the next point that's being brought up is being able to always think of Krishna, who is the shelter of all the living entities. I'm not going to go into that discussion. Prabhupada talks about Garbhodakshai, Vishnu, Mahavishnu, the living entities taking shelter. It's technical, I don't want to go into that. The idea is that the mind is always thinking of Krishna. That is only possible when we begin to Krishnaize the senses. The senses are controlled. Otherwise, the senses are dragging our consciousness to the sense objects. How do we think of Krishna? No question of thinking of Krishna. So first things first is we have to Krishnaize the senses, be very rigid, vigilant. And this is the hard part about devotional service. That unless we are vigorous and keeping ourselves in relation to Krishna, then there's every chance of falling down at any moment. Even if you chant your 16 good rounds. Chant your 16 good rounds, but not vigilant to keep yourself constantly engaged in relationship to Krishna, then chant your 16 good rounds and fall down right after that. It's just a natural, that's what happens in the material world. So we always want to think of Krishna. That's possible when we control the senses. And then in this way, we are practicing Parama Bhakti Yoga, the supreme process of devotional service. And we're making advancement in that devotional service. And by advancement, the more we advance in that devotional service, the more we gain the realization that Krishna is our very self. Barbara was saying. Qualitatively, we are not different from Krishna, or another way that Krishna is our very self. Because the Jiva is the Tatastha Shakti of the Supreme Lord, and the Shakti is different from the possessor of the Shakti. So you could say in that sense that the Jiva is Krishna. So when one becomes realized, he realizes that Krishna is actually my very self. And therefore, working for the pleasure of Krishna is actually my self-interest. If I'm truly selfish and I work only for the pleasure of Krishna, understanding that pleasing Krishna is my true self-interest, that realization comes by elevating oneself through devotional service, where one naturally, his consciousness is naturally removed from the body and brought to the lotus feet of Krishna. There are a lot of details you could say. I didn't want to go into so many details. I'm physically a little bit out of it. So I'm going to close my discussion here. If anyone wants to ask anything, yeah. I saw your sign first. The mic appeared.
Huh?
The mic appeared.
Yeah, so in that case, because it's like you don't even see the sun, you're just so covered by the cloud that even though the conception is there that, oh, there must be a sun, it may as well not be there because you can't really perceive it.
So there's a situation, and my intelligence tells me this is the higher path, but my mind is not able to get on board that, because although I know a sun is there, it's covered by a cloud, and therefore I don't perceive it. I don't see how it's going to help me, and therefore I can't take the higher path. I can't take the higher road. Yeah, anyway, that is a general experience in the beginning stages. It's like a daily experience, no? I know this is the higher path, but anyway, gaining spiritual strength requires strong faith in sadhus, gurus. I just read this from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He said spiritual strength comes by guru nishta. And we're having problems in that area also. So Guru, Hari Guru, Vaishnava, Nishta. When you have that Nishta and Hari Guru, Vaishnava, then you get spiritual strength to overcome the various obstacles in devotional service. So then our weakness in taking the higher road also shows weakness in our, let's say, attachment to Hari Guru and Vaishnavas, our fixed faith in them. So maybe we should start in that area, like that. It's not such an easy thing. Anyway, one should always know that spiritual life is attained by people who are very serious, you know. Unless we increase because the nice thing about, like now, we're living in a very nice community, let's say up and coming spiritual community, and it's very satisfying in the overall sense, pleasing. And we all got our struggles in devotional service. We got finding fault with each other and all these things that, it goes on. But overall sense, the community is a very nice community of devotees. And the immediate tendency of the conditioned soul is like, this is a nice situation. And then we are less serious. And therefore, these types of struggles accost us, and we kind of, it won't even be like a huge deal, but because of the lack of seriousness, then we are not able to overcome. So a lot of times, aside from the point of increasing our faith in Hari Guru Vaishnavas, we probably should increase our seriousness about not only in terms of what we were trying to achieve in life, but the precariousness of the situation we're in now. If I were to die, like someone said, well, Someone asked us when I was in New York, Harinam. One homeless guy was there dancing our Harinam, and there were many devotees there. And after the Harinam stopped for a second, he screamed out, "Do you care if you die right now?" to some devotee. And the devotee gave a very beautiful answer, the nice, beautiful answer. Well, because we're always absorbed in Krishna, then even if we die right now, then, it won't even matter. We'll go to Krishna, And so, and then I spoke right after that. I said, I don't want to die right now. I'm scared. I said, where my mind and consciousness is at, I don't think I'm going to Krishna. I think I'm going somewhere else, So I said, I'm a little concerned if I were to die now. I said, I want to live as long as, it has something to do with how long do you want to live. And I said, I want to live as long as possible because I need a lot of work and bringing my mind to Krishna. I need to increase my seriousness and so on. So we need to be, there should be gravity. The seriously inquisitive sage, armed with knowledge and renunciation, realizes the absolute truth according to what he's heard and in the Vedas and the Shruti, right? This verse comes one. It's a nice verse. So not only seriousness about the goal of our life, but also seriousness about the precariousness of our situation. I'm not Krishna conscious, actually. So I might be having a great time, but I'm not actually Krishna conscious. So if I were to die right now, then my situation is definitely uncertain, destiny unknown, right? So, and getting seriousness is not an easy thing either. Like I often mention that one of the prominent diseases of this age is frivolity. This is one of the most prominent diseases of this age, is that no one takes anything seriously. I remember growing up when my mother used to yell at us and chastise us, we would start laughing. Of course it was short-lived because, anyway, I don't want to go into the details of that. But sometimes it would just my mother would be livid about something, steam coming out of all the gates of the body, and we would be laughing, it was like a big joke. And then something that was dangerous, actually it was something that we needed to hear, but we were just taking it like a joke, And the spiritual authorities, they're chastising us. Everything is all just big fun and games, And everyone just takes everything as a big joke. No seriousness. The Maharajas, they're coming, they're spilling their blood to try to pour Hari Katha down our ears. And right after the class, just speaking all sorts of nonsense in the Prasadam hall. Nothing to do with the class. And if you ask anyone, what was the class about? They have to really go into their database and, what was it? And then they'll say a point from 3 classes before, 3 days before, that had nothing to do with it. No, I'm talking about this class. Oh, that was from another class? No seriousness, no contemplating the message of seriousness of nothing. So to get serious, to overcome the infection of frivolity is itself quite challenging in the age of Kali. So that can also be with serious devotees, but it may take time, What else can be said? There is no substitute for maturity. You wanted to say something, Yannick?
Prabhu, you mentioned that senses and mind is Krishna's energy, so it's very difficult for us to control ourselves. But it's only possible when you control them. It's possible to control them if you engage them in Krishna consciousness. So I was thinking, you may endeavor to control them in Krishna consciousness, but you may still fall down. And I think you mentioned something, but I was wondering if you could elaborate, something about chanting good 16 rounds, but I lost that bit.
No, I said even if we chant 16 good rounds, if we're not vigilant to keep ourselves engaged in relation to Krishna after our 16 quote-unquote good rounds, according to our estimation, then right afterwards there'll be fall down, It could be smaller things, like suppose you're supposed to fast on an Acharya's day, but you have a habit of taking a burfi sweet right after you finish your japa. That's just your spontaneous habit. Okay, 16 rounds done, okay, 2, and that's just the spontaneous habit. So then it comes that today is an Acharya's day. You're supposed to fast until noon. And we heard that it's announced at the Tosi, after Tosi, or right before Tosi, the announcement is made. Everyone fasts until noon. And yes, you heard it. You chant your 16 rounds, and then while you're eating the second one, you recall that, oh, I was supposed to actually fast. So my point was that we're not vigilant, we're not vigilant in the sense control. Then there will be, that's like a small example, like a fall down per se. But you can make it on a larger scale. There will be fall down.
Basically, we should be very introspective, every aspect of our day, basically.
Not only introspective, very active in how you're using this facility. What are we thinking about? Many times I've termed it the spaced out Shakti of Maya. And Maya has three potencies: the throwing potency, the covering potency, and the spaced out potency. Because many times I observe, and all of us, that there are just moments where like all of a sudden you just go into like a deep contemplative state. And then you can, and if you ever see that, you will see the voice like suddenly shake themselves out of it also. You'll see them like this. Like, whoa, back to reality, You will see it, I've observed it. I've seen many times, Mukunda and I, we all used to joke about the spaced out Shakti. Because even during the kirtan it goes on, the devotees are playing the mridanga. And then I'll be looking at them singing, I'm like, yo, what's going on? And then you'll see them go like, oh yeah, I'm in a kirtan, I gotta. So, that means the mind is probably thinking about women or something. Therefore, although the kirtan is going on, spacing out, the sense, the mental speculations parading before the mind and causing that to happen. So we're not vigilant to keep the mind fixed, to keep the senses fixed. It takes a lot. This is why we feel tired, Actually, if you have to really be try to really be. I remember Madhukari said this, and I thought this was brilliant. Prabhupada said that if you were, even if you're 50% Krishna conscious at the end of your life, you can go back home at the Godhead, something to this effect. We've heard this many times. It never impacted me seriously. So I was like, even to be 50%, you would have to be 100%. And then he said, and then Madhukari told something that it clicked for me when the statement. He said, if I could live half of my day in full Krishna consciousness, then I thought about that. I'm like, yeah, half the day in full Krishna consciousness. How tough that would be, actually, to live 1 hour in full Krishna consciousness, not spacing out, not running after the sense objects internally. I was like, wow. So therefore, when Prabhupada says be 50%, he actually means be 100%. At least you should try for 100%, and maybe that way it come down to 50%, Just like sometimes we joke in the Mongol arti prayers, Gurvashtakam prayers, the last verse says, remembering 3 times a day. We say you should try to remember throughout the day, and then it'll come down to 3, Finally 3 times, I made it, I made it 3 times a day. So like that, my point is that if we should really try to concentrate the mind and senses on Krishna, vigorous. I just heard a lecture from Prabhupada I've been listening to repeatedly over the last few days. Vigorous to do, then you will definitely feel tired in the nighttime, Hard work, I have to try to control my senses and mind in relation to Krishna the whole day. You'll be tired. Like that.
In the Mridanga example that you were saying that, I don't know who you were talking about, but you could, it was active, he's actively engaging his senses, but still.
Well, one of the senses is the mind, and the mind is the center of the senses, as Krishna tells us in the Gita. So if the mind, even if all the other senses are engaged, if the internal organ, the mind, fails to be engaged, then one will get minimum effect of his engagement. I'm sure we have experience of that all the time. Where one thing is, for example, doing the arti for the deity or Srila Prabhupada. Many times, in the beginning, when we didn't know what we were doing, you were fully focused, on the deity, and you're like, oh my God, you were fearful and, scared and shaking. But then after you got used to the activity, right? Prabhupada, this example was given, once you get used to the activity, that gives the mind freedom to do other things, right? Because you're used to the activity. So in the beginning, when you're learning cooking, if you don't know cooking, it's like, okay, here's the recipe book, and you're the mind is fully engaged. But after you got down your basic recipes down, you know how to do it, you can do it with your eyes closed. So then you got that covered, now what are you going to do with the mind? now the mind doesn't need the recipe book and needs to find all the spices. You know, your body is just automatically doing everything. Then what are you doing with your mind that time? Probably, contemplating the faults of devotees, or, oh, why he come in the kitchen like that? He's not supposed to do that. What are we doing with the mind? So if the mind is not engaged, ultimately, just like inattentive chanting, what does inattentive chanting mean? It means tongue is engaged, mind is not engaged. Right? In the chanting, it's doing something else. So finally, in fact, you'll discover that most of the activities in Krishna consciousness is just to control the mind. It is actually the mind which is keeping us in the material world. The intelligence will accept the paramount viability of Krishna consciousness. It's easy for the intelligence to understand it in a lot of ways, in one sense. By philosophy and so on, the intelligence can understand Krishna consciousness is a must, but to get the mind to agree to that is very challenging. So Krishna said, Manashashtani Pakritistani Karshati. Today there's a lot of Bhagavad Gita shlokas coming, Bhagavad Gita, back to basics, huh? So Krishna mentions this point that the living entity has been struggling in this world, birth after birth, on account of the mind and senses, and of that, the mind, because then Krishna says in the next verse that he's carrying his different conceptions in life from one body to another as the air carries. He's referring to the mental situation. And then due to that mental situation, he's getting a certain type of eye, a certain type of ear, a certain type of tongue. So it's the mind that is the dilemma for the conditioned soul, actually. Rascal mind. You should beat with shoes in the morning, with broomstick in the evening.
Can you elaborate on that? I never understood. How do you beat the mind with the shoes?
That means chant Hare Krishna in the morning, chant Hare Krishna in the evening. The whole morning program is beating the mind with because the mind is like, oh, come on. Like literally, I'm not, anyway, I'm going to say this point, to do the whole morning program solid is a beating for the mind. The mind is like wore out. That's why after the end of the morning program, it's like, phew. It's just like when you're getting beat up by a bully or something, and he finally starts pounding you, then you feel relieved, right? So similarly, when we do this morning program, and for the mind, it's just like a pounding. And then when finally it stops, right? Finally. Srila Prabhupada ki, oh, Jai. Liberation. We're like so happy. Jai. Therefore, one devotee was mentioning this point. It was quite funny how when they were, Srila Prabhupada says, chant and be happy. And then one guest came to the temple during the japa period. And all the devotees, they don't look exactly happy, they look like struck. Some of them might be crying on account of just thinking about sense gratification, not being able to pursue it, Some of them may be crying on account that they have to be there, they don't want to be there. So when he came to the morning japa period, Prabhupada said, be happy, but where is the happiness, No happiness. Then in the Bhagavatam class, everyone was looking like, and that's if they're not sleeping, That's if they're not sleep. If that's if they're awake, they're looking totally apathetic, totally like I could give a crap about this, When is it gonna? And then Srila Prabhupada ki jai, phew, release. So this is beating for the mind in the morning, and then in the evening time beating with the evening program, like that. Doesn't mean something to that effect. All right, Shai Prabhu, say something.
Nice. Thank you so much for the nice class, Prabhu. Really, there's so many points. I'm not going to give a class appreciating the points, but like an essence thing that really struck me was that you're talking about Bhagavad Gita basics. Prabhupada expresses in the Vyavasayatmika Buddhi, verse 241, that the highest accomplishment in Krishna consciousness is freedom from the bodily concept of life. And I think that even after practicing Krishna consciousness for many, many years and traveling preacher and whatever you're doing, a lot of people don't come to that point of really focusing on understanding what that means. Like he was saying, this concern, this doubt can be there. People are engaging their senses, but still there's a fall down. Why? Because you haven't gotten free from the concept that you're the body. So then the body wants something, so you agree to that idea. So while we're practicing, like therefore Krishna goes through, right, like chapter 5, you work in the proper consciousness to come to the realization of the conception that you are not the body, then understand who Krishna is and how his energies are there, and engage the mind in serving with that conception, etc. We have to actually want to achieve self-realization, like I'm a spirit soul, not just, like you were saying, it can be a comfortable situation. So I don't know, that was like from this, it's, Mamcha Yoga Vicharana, we can just practice Krishna consciousness and it's supposed to take us there, but we, like, the point that you made very nicely is that we have, it's really, if you want to get it, it's the only way you're going to get it. You can't just go through the conveyor belt and you're going to get there or something. You have to really want to understand I am spirit, soul, part and parcel of Krishna, and who is Krishna. Otherwise, you're never going to get there. So, I mean, there's so much more that can be said about it, but that point is really strong for me. Like, you really have to want to know that. Or somehow it's still within the material realm, and that conception is not going to become clear. Anyway, my 2 cents. Thank you.
Anyone wants to say anything further? No. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.